Ooh, ooh, ooh. What's up, y'all? It's your boy D-Liver, and welcome back to another edition of Special Delivery, my weekly segment where I give you guys my POV on various things going on, les topics du jour, if you want to be all French about it, the things that people are thinking about, discussing, staying awake at night, thinking about. And I just want to give you my perspective on it, which is hopefully a fresh perspective, and more importantly, get your take on it. It's all about discussion, baby. It's all about discussion, baby. Because a lot of times when you hear these things on various talk shows or news outlets, it's just people yapping at you, trying to tell you what to think. Y'all are adults. Y'all are rational thinkers. And y'all are honest deep down, even if you're not allowed to be in public. Speaking of which, this week's topic is transgenderism, transgenders, whatever you want to call it. And my stance on it is as follows. I am anti-trans. I'll say it again, I'm anti-trans, but, and that's a big but, I am not anti-trannies. I am not anti-transgender people. I do not advocate for violence against them, nor do I wish for them to be undermined in any way, shape, or form. However, I don't do the pronoun thing. If I see a dude that's trying to be a girl, I'm just like, oh, that's a dude. If I see a girl trying to be a guy, I'm like, oh, that's a girl. That's what's up. The name thing is a little bit tricky because there's a precedent, at least personally and just kind of more publicly, of people having names that aren't necessarily their government or birth assigned names, right? You got your stage name for artists. I go by D-Liver, but my real name is Vidal. You know, if I meet Jay-Z, I'm not just going to walk out to him and be like, hey, what's up, Sean? Sean Corey. I'll be like, oh, what up, Hove? Or bare minimum, Mr. Carter. Even personally, I have a former coworker who I only knew as his new legally changed name. People legally change their names. And once I found out his original name, it would have been weird for me to refer to him as his original name. So the name thing is tricky, and where I am with it is behind the back, I'll probably call them by their original name if I happen to know their original name. But if I'm interacting with them in person, I'll probably refer to them as their new trans name. What do you even call the new trans name? I don't know. Your stage name? Your artist name? Formerly known as? I don't know. So for instance, case in point, Bruce Jenner, I still call Bruce Jenner Bruce. I know he goes by Caitlyn now, and everybody calls him Caitlyn, but it's like, bruh, you went by Bruce your whole life and then just switched up. If you go back to Bruce, I'm just going to call you Bruce. I don't know, whatever. But the reason I think it's also very important to make it very clear, I do not hate transgender people. I'll say it again. I don't hate transgender people. Say it again for the camera on the right. I don't hate transgender people. Just kidding, there's no camera on the right. Say it again for the camera on the left. I don't hate transgender people. Just kidding again. There's no cameras over there. But I gotta say it again and again and again because somebody hearing me say I intentionally misgender trans people will say, that's an act of hate. That's an act of violence. You're endangering the lives of transgender people. No, I'm not. That's nonsense. I don't hate them. I just think that the ideology, and we'll get into the fundamental idea, but the idea that your psychological gender is distinct from your sex, your genetic gender, your X and Y chromosomes that exist in the nuclei of every single one of the cells in your body, the fact that those two different things are different and people who are experiencing that identity disorder are correct in that belief, I think is nonsense. And I don't think that I have to behave and change my behavior accordingly to accept that belief. And I don't think that is inconsistent with or incompatible with wanting those people to be able to engage and believe these things. And I think the fundamental thing that I'm trying to encourage and convey through this messaging and this monologue, if you will, two primary things. One is a push for more peaceful coexistence. I think it's very possible for trans to live the way they live and to have their language rules and their whole ideology. And for me, people like me who believe that this is not the truth, is not fact, and shouldn't and don't want to feel compelled to adopt speech patterns or behavioral patterns to comply and accept that belief notion, I think we can still peacefully coexist. And the way I think, and I'll get into actually the method later, the other way is to just have an open and honest expression of a sentiment that I know many, if not most people feel. But at this point in time, we're being coerced into not being able to express it openly for fear of being cast as hateful people. That's why I said 3-4 times, I do not hate trans people. So we'll get into a few things. Let's first define transgenderism. And more specifically, let's define the underlying mental condition that is its foundation. Gender dysphoria. The American Psychiatric Association, in its Diagnostic and Statistical Manual for Mental Disorders, edition 5 in code 302.85, they define gender dysphoria as the marked incongruence between one's experienced/expressed gender and their assigned gender, lasting at least 6 months. Couple things to note. This is a mental disorder, or categorized as such. And if you say, oh man, don't call it a mental disorder, that stigmatizes it. What are you saying, that something's wrong with them? Actually, yeah, I am. I think it's a profound identity disorder. But listen, people experience these things. I won't even say, I already said I don't hate them. I won't even say I pity them, because I think that's really condescending. It is what it is. All right? But let me ask you this. If I think that such a notion is ridiculous and absurd, which is what I think, how do you all feel about Rachel Dolezal? Remember this lady? This is the white lady who was the former NAACP president of the Spokane, Washington chapter. And I think she was a college professor as well, but was a white lady who identified as black, presented herself as black, insinuated and asserted that she was black, and even got her Master of Fine Arts at Howard University, which is a historically black college and university. At the time that all went down, everyone was like, yo, this bitch is crazy. She's a fraud, she's a liar, get her out of here, get her fired, strip her of all her positions, and everyone just clowned her. But guess what people say? People say race is a social construct. Race doesn't exist. You're not really black, I'm not really white. This is just all made up by power structures to control us. Now they're saying the same thing. Gender, social construct. This is all made up. It doesn't even really exist. It is what it is in our minds. Like, bruh, if y'all were so quick to denounce this lady and other people who happen to feel transracial, why do you not feel the same way for transgenders? These are mental identity, profound identity disorders, and should be treated as such. Now, the other way I think about it is, this is a religion, right? Even if you want to say, okay, no, Liva, you're wrong. This is true, this is a fact, there's plenty of science and research around this, you're being ignorant and intolerant. You're allowed to believe that. But that's where it is. That's what it is to me. It's a belief system. It's an ideology. Just like if I'm a Christian and I come up to a Muslim and I'm like, hey man, you need to accept Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior, otherwise you're going to hell. You have to say God, you have to address me as brother, whatever. You have to address my pastor as father, whatever. And you have to modify your rules and behavior. You cannot pray 5 times a day. You cannot do all these things. And if the converse situation occurred where a Muslim were trying to impose all these beliefs and rules on the Christians, everyone would say, whoa, hey. You do your thing, I do my thing. That's how we all peacefully coexist, like those corny coexist bumper stickers, that have the religion, the symbols of the religion and all things. So, and matter of fact, whether you want to or not, the United States Constitution protects against this. The very first remarks in the United States Constitution Bill of Rights, the First Amendment, everyone is aware of this. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press. You cannot impose your belief system on me just because you feel it is more true than others. So what I think is fact, that sex and gender are the same thing, and they are inextricable. And anyone who feels differently is operating on a flawed premise, just like I'm allowed to say that I think that Hinduism is flawed, or I think that Islam rather is flawed. and we can all live peacefully together. And I think that's a more rational and reasonable way to approach it, which is why I'm asserting that transgenderism and gender dysphoria as a fact is more an ideology. Now, it's also important to understand that this only affects a very tiny percentage of people. The Williams Institute in a 2016 study estimated that about 0.6% of United States adults, about 1.96 million people, identify as being transgender. And this small segment of this population, in the spirit of inclusion, in the spirit of tolerance, is having an outsized influence on the American public. Now, you might be saying, oh, you're alarmist, like, it's not that big of a deal, what are you talking about? People aren't being forced to change their behavior. It is and it isn't, right? Like, people listening to me intentionally say Bruce Jenner and Caitlyn Jenner, and Bruce Jenner is a man, and they're triggered to the point where they think I'm a genuinely hateful person. Add to that, if you intentionally misgender people, you can be characterized as a bigot. And some of the most respectful comedians, entertainers, people that I know to be particularly flagrant, if you will, in the content of their comedy, they're going along with the language rules, particularly when it comes to pronouns. And I think the fundamental thing that I find unsettling about it is that it's all a big lie. As I see it, this gender and sex separation. And people are being coerced to go along and speak in compliance with the lie, and there's a cost to speaking in compliance with the truth, right? Like the average adult, the average person, let's say past a certain age, will hear, oh yeah, gender and sex are the exact same thing. Why would anyone think differently? But if you say that and speak in accordance, you can be punished. If not by your job, by society, by pressure on the internet, by forces that are very, very strong and strong enough to make people who would ordinarily speak otherwise not either stay quiet or speak in compliance with this lie that's being presented. And that's where I think is one of a couple major issues with it. One is that it's founded on a lie. The other is something a little bit more technical, or maybe more consequential. Right? So the reason why I've been very insistent on establishing the absence of hate in my disagreement with this ideology is because hate and acts of hate are punishable by law. So if you can establish that somebody is behaving in a hateful way, according to certain statutes, that hateful person can be imprisoned, they can be persecuted, they can suffer very real consequences. And if you don't think that this is possible, it's already happened in Canada. The C-16 bill passed in June 2017. This was the bill that Jordan Peterson was very outspoken against. It added to the legal code, let me get the phrasing correct, the phrase gender identity or expression to a couple of sections of the legal code, the Canadian Human Rights Act and the Criminal Code. And it added gender identity or expression to the identifiable characteristics of a group that are protected against hate propaganda. What's hate propaganda? Hate propaganda is statements that willfully promote hatred against an identifiable group. Again, gender dysphoria people have been added to this group, whether by telephone, broadcasting, or other audible or visual means. Now, there are various defenses against this charge of hate propaganda, such as the communicated statements are true, the opinion was an argument expressed in good faith, and that the statements were relevant to a subject of public interest. Things like that. So there have outlined some defenses against these charges, but nonetheless, if you establish as part of your legal code that hate is a crime, and you say, yo, you not or refusing to do the pronoun thing, refusing to call someone by their name, refusing to acknowledge and accept our ideology is hate, all of a sudden I'm a criminal. That's why I think it's very important for people who feel similarly, honestly, genuinely, with no hate, no malice, to speak up against these things, because they can become part of the legal code, and they can become a vector for people to suppress your ability to express yourself freely. There was also an incident in, I think it was Montana. I forget which state this was. But it was a professor who got into the professor was a Meriwether. I'm getting the names all mixed up, but he was reprimanded by the university for refusing to address a transgender man to woman. I think there's a transgender woman as Miss. And the student felt that he was see what I'm saying? It's very confusing, that he was being discriminated against, and threatened to sue the university. And the university said that the professor had to change his ways. And the professor said, no, this isn't consistent with what I believe. And he appealed the decision. And lower courts agreed, sided with the university. But after he appealed, there were higher courts that sided with the professor, saying that he was allowed to express his freedom of speech in this particular instance. But people's jobs, livelihoods, reputations are at stake. If we cannot come to a sensible agreement on how to proceed and navigate this thing. So I'm genuinely curious, because it's one of those things where when I hear it, I'm just like, yo, everyone is going along with this. And then in private conversations, like, you ask women, yo, do you think a trans dude is naturally a woman? Like, my mom was hilarious. She was like, well, can he make a baby? Can he get pregnant? Does he menstruate? Then he's not a woman. So it's just like, everyone in their heart of hearts knows it. But I think what's happening is a lot of people are just like, well, it's no skin off my back to call them a woman if they want to be a woman. It's no skin off my back to call him a man if he wants to be a man. But I do think that it is important to, at some point, say, yo, where are we going with all this? Like, you guys can believe what you want, but you can't bully us. And you have even some technology. I was on a flight with this girl who works at Facebook, and she was like, every so often we're asked to reassert our pronouns. You have all this virtual signaling on people's bios where they're like, I'm a he, him, she, sure, whatever. It's like, bruh, you know what we are. This is not a thing that most people accept to be true, or an ideology that we accept as valid, but it's being forced on us. And anytime you force anything on anyone, you're going to get, and especially if you suppress dissidence, that dissidence is going to exist. It's just going to be underground. It's going to boil, bubble up, and it's going to react and erupt in a way that is potentially unhealthy. So I don't want to go on too long, but again, this is how I genuinely feel about this. I'm curious to hear how y'all feel about it. I'm curious to hear if people feel consistently, or if I'm wrong, I'm a dinosaur. I'm only 30 years old, and I feel like, when I be seeing some of this stuff, I'm like, am I going crazy? Am I just a dinosaur that's just relegated to the past, or are things getting really, really messed up? And for all of y'all that say that you're progressives, my question is, where are you progressing? To where are you progressing? Like, how is this productive? How is dismantling all forms of categorizations or disambiguations of human beings? And last point, we see where this is going with athletics, right? This has been one of the topics that has been more recently in the news. Men, transgender men to women competing with actual women. Everybody knows, and everybody was foretelling of the potential consequences of this and the danger that it places women. And we're starting to see it now. So before it gets too far, I think everyone has to speak up, and I'm curious to hear what your thoughts are. Thanks again for tuning in. I'll talk to y'all next week. Peace.